Proverbs 13, verse 6 is where we're going to start. Today, we're going to see the last of the passages that I have designated to set aside on that subject of integrity. And so we want to talk about that. Remember, this comes from a couple of words, Hebrew words, which really come from the same word, but tom and tamim, which mean wholeness, complete, all of it. And tom specifically refers to completely good. Tamim could be completely all of something good or bad, but especially we're using the ones that talk about you're completely good, meaning not just outwardly righteous, not just looking good to other people, but specifically all the way in your heart, your genuine, true desire is to do what is right and to please God. That's the subject. Now, it's interesting that these last several passages, we're going to see this phrase, walking in integrity, walking in tom, completeness, which refers to this action, this outward action that stems from a heart that is fully given to righteousness, that is sincerely set on pleasing God. So, while the outward actions are not the only thing involved in integrity, it's really what's in your heart, it produces walking in your integrity. So you start acting outwardly in accordance with your integrity. And actually there's one verse that we've already mentioned that talks about this, walking in integrity. It's chapter 10, verse 9. He that walketh uprightly, that's, again, that same word, integrity. He that walketh uprightly walketh surely, but he that perverteth his ways shall be known. That was the proverb that we began with several weeks ago. Now, look at chapter 13. I think actually we did 13 last time. So let's go to 19. I'm sorry. I told you 13 verse 6, but we did that one last week. Chapter 19 verse 1 says this, better is the poor that walketh in his integrity than he that is perverse in his lips and is a fool. Better is the poor. So here's a man who is poor, but he's walking, he's acting outwardly, his lifestyle is produced by a heart that is sincerely given to pleasing God. There's a sincerity, a wholeness, a complete desire to follow God. And so his actions are produced from that kind of heart. So even though he's poor, he has very little influence, very little resources, all of that kind of thing. Even though he's poor, that is the preferable case, to be poor and have a sincere heart that produces actions of righteousness from a sincere heart. Then he that is perverse in his lips and is a fool. Now, this is going to be a recurring theme, so let's remember what perverse means. Perverse means crooked. It means going here, and then going there, and then going this way, and then going that way. So a person who's perverse in their lips might be going in the right way for a little while, and then they get crooked. They twist it, right? So here is a person, in contrast to the one who is walking in integrity. He's walking in a straight path, trying with a sincere heart to just please God. That's his goal. It's a straight path. The other path is considered crooked. Maybe he'll walk for a little while in the way that looks like he's trying to please God, but then he's over here, then he's over there. Why? Because his heart is not to please God. He may have a heart to please himself, and he might be pleased himself for a little while to walk in a way that looks like he's pleasing God. That might accomplish his goals, right? His goal might be to get people to think he's righteous, or to get people to think that he's a good person or whatever, And so he's going to walk in that way for a little while, but you'll see him veering off of it whenever it's convenient for him because he's not walking in integrity. His whole being isn't given to righteousness. He just has a little bit of a desire for righteousness that produces some of it on the outside, but it's not real. It's not sincere. And a good example of this is the study we did this morning with the rich young ruler who had a good reason for righteousness, but not the right reason. It wasn't full and integral. It wasn't whole in his heart. He was, so here it's talking specifically not about the actions of the fool, but the lips of the fool. He's perverse in his lips. His lips are crooked. Now, we'll get comments on this in a second, but these are going to reoccur. So let me give you another passage in chapter 28, verse 6. Chapter 28, verse 6 says this. It's almost the same, but only it's a little different. Better is the poor that walketh in his uprightness. Again, same word, tome, tome, and this one, integrity. Better is the poor that walketh in his uprightness than he that is perverse, there's that word, but now it's not in his lips, it's in his ways, though he be rich. So one person is walking in his integrity. He's living according to a sincere, genuine desire to please God. And the other person is perverse in his lips. His lips are crooked. He'll say one thing and say this other thing over here to this person, to that person, to convince them that he's righteous, maybe for a little while. Here, it is better to be poor and walk in your uprightness than to be rich. Now you're rich and your ways are crooked. Now the implication is that you are using crooked ways to get to riches. And you say, well, maybe it's worth doing a little bit of a crooked thing here just to get a little bit of money. And maybe with the money, I could support my family. I could do all kinds of righteous things with it, And so you're convincing yourself that it's worth being crooked. And Solomon is saying, trust me, it's not. It is better to be poor and walk in integrity than to be perverse in your ways and be rich. And then in the same chapter, we have another verse that sort of summarizes this all and gives us the end, the reason why. Verse 18. Now this is tamim, not tome, but they both have the same kind of meaning. Whoso walketh uprightly shall be saved, but he that is perverse in his ways shall fall at once. There that word uprightly, whoso walketh uprightly, that's integrity, that's that word, shall be saved, but he that is perverse in his ways shall fall at once. Meaning he's going to be destroyed all at one time. Now this is the end. It's like, remember the Psalm of Asaph when he looked at the wicked and said, "Oh, why are they prospering? Maybe I should be like them. Maybe I should just stop trying to be righteous because it seems like they're prospering." And then he says, "Then I remembered their end, and I realized I don't want to go there because I remember where they're going to end." And this is the same kind of thing. Solomon here is saying, all right, if you don't believe me that it's better to walk in your integrity, then just think about what integrity means. It means having a true desire to please God, who is the judge, who created you for his pleasure. Do you really want to answer to God having been perverse in your ways because it gave you a little bit more money? Or do you want to answer to him knowing that you've pleased him with your life? You will fall all at once. I guarantee you stand before him in a perverse way, and you're going to fall all at once, but who's going to be saved? Well, it's going to be the ones who have sincerity in their hearts, that their hearts are given over to God. Now, we know that needs salvation, because none of us are perfect and whole in our hearts, but that doesn't mean that once we've found God's grace and salvation, we shouldn't move on from there in sincerity and wholeness in our hearts, constantly taking the sins that are in our hearts to the Lord and not seeing the sins of our hearts as no big deal because nobody sees those things, which is our tendency, right? Our tendency is to deal with the things that everyone sees and everything everybody knows, and the things that are in our hearts, well, I guess I slipped up there, but nobody knows. No big deal. Not a big deal. Doesn't change the fact that I'm a good person. Well, yes, it does, actually. It's the main thing that makes you a bad person, is the things that are in your heart. Okay, we have two more to go to, but I'm going to stop there because these are all kind of on the same theme, that perverse, poor, and walking in integrity is better than being perverse and being rich, and that's because of the ultimate destruction that comes either in this life or the next for those who are perverse. What are your thoughts on those? Yeah, and I think that's really important, that on a personal level, of course, it's kind of we're kind of aiming at that, but that you're not wrong to say that this is just sort of human nature, and we see it all around us, where people aren't willing to say, okay, that could be wrong, and maybe we should deal with it if it is a wrong thing. Let's at least look honestly at it and accept that if it is wrong, what we're looking at, we're willing to address it. Yeah, and I mean, I think there's, for instance, well, I'll just use a very, very recent example. Although I'm not on the side of thinking that this thing is wrong, I do think some people jump to conclusions without being willing to consider it. So the thing that happened, I think it was on Wednesday this week, where the ICE officer shot the woman who was protesting. I don't think he was actually wrong in doing that personally, but I do think there were a lot of people who jumped in and just said he couldn't be wrong, without actually saying, well, let's see, if he's wrong, he's wrong. You know, he should face justice. And so I think we all have that tendency to say, no, it can't be wrong. Well, we'll just think about it for a second, and if it is, then it is, and if it's not, then it's not. And so I think that, again, in this case, I don't think he was wrong, but I think that it was good for those who approached that to first say, well, let me look at it. Let me look at some of the videos. Let me kind of think about it. I'm willing to say he's wrong if he was wrong. Just because my side is saying this and their side is saying that doesn't mean I have to take one view. And I think that's important, that we're able to be a little introspective and say, all right, well, am I actually being sincere about this? Or am I just trying to prove myself right? Yeah. Anyone else? Yep.
Yeah. For your richness.
Mm-hmm.
That's all we got.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that goes to honor, which is something we covered not too long ago, but really, I think Solomon is trying to show us that honor is going to happen naturally when you approach life with integrity. So instead of just trying to come out and have this pretense of being a good person that you can trust, why don't you be a person that people can trust, and then eventually they'll trust you, right? When they start to see that, again, I think if this is not a problem for you, just don't tell me because it makes me feel bad. But I think, to me, it feels like all of us have this problem where it's like, I want people to trust me, so I'm going to go out and do the things that make people, rather than saying, I'm going to really sincerely in my heart be the person that is a trustworthy person, or so on and so forth, you know. I use this example a lot because I think it's just a very obvious example that, you know, we do a beginning of the year, I'm going to read my Bible through, and then it's the first thing we have the hardest, it's not so hard for us to get up and go to church on Sunday because everyone's going to know if we're not there. Everyone's going to see it. So how can we pretend to be righteous if we never go to church? But if we never read our Bible, nobody knows, right? So it's a lot easier to drop that because that's our tendency is the outward stuff and not the inward, not the private, the secret stuff. Yeah. Yes, Melody? Yeah, that's an interesting take, right? That seems to be going towards that idea that there's not just destruction at the throne of God one day for those who are perverse, but there's also the destruction that you bring on yourself spiritually with your own conscience telling you this is what you're pretending to be is not what you are. And of course, there's also destruction when people do eventually find out, and they do, that you were just making up this whole facade this whole time. You see stories about this all the time, all the time in the news. It's like, especially with sexual sins, like that kind of reveals the character of a person that you thought was a good person until that comes out, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I think that's also true, for sure. Judy, did you have your hand up?
It has a position of power to find people on both sides of it.
Right. Yes, exactly. And that kind of leads me into another thought, too, that one of the things we're trying to accomplish as parents with our children is to get them, before they have any kind of authority over other people, to be people of integrity, right? We want them to understand that who you are when nobody is watching, what you'll do when you think nobody will ever know, that's who you are. That is who you are, right? And until you say, doesn't matter if anybody's watching or not, I'm going to do what's right, you're not ready to be an authority, that's for sure. Certainly not ready to be in front of people being their, role model, right? Yeah. Let me give you a couple more and get your thoughts on those, and then we'll be done. So chapter 20, verse 7. of Proverbs says this, another one walking in integrity. This is the just man walketh in his integrity, and his children are blessed after him. Now, some have rendered this to even just say, how just is a man that walks in his integrity, and how wonderful it is for his children if he's a righteous man who's walking in his integrity. I'm adding a lot of words, but that's the sense that's meant here, right? Look at this guy. He's not just righteous on the outside, but he's truly righteous because he's walking in integrity. He has sincere desire to please God. He's not just putting on a show. And what a blessing that is for his children. What a wonderful thing it is for children to have a father who is like actually sincerely wanting to please God. I mean, because you have the fathers that are unjust, who have no desire to please God, and then the fathers who just want to look like they're pleasing God. And those are the ones that, they'll maybe, a good example would be somebody who, takes the family to church every Sunday so it looks good and goes home and, immediately you have problems and you have him living very differently than he does in public. And what does that do to children? Well, it ruins children. They see the hypocrisy. They see the inconsistency. If there's one thing that teenagers do not like, it's hypocrisy, right? If it doesn't, that's not measuring up to me. And so children are blessed if they have parents that will walk in integrity. What are your thoughts on that one before we move on to the last one? Do as I say, not as I do. Yes, well. My mom only ever said that in jest. But I did hear that as a kid.
I think that came out once the kids became older in our interactions with them.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, you gotta just imagine me trying to teach a young adult Sunday school class with them double checking everything I say on ChatGPT. Well, ChatGPT. No, I'm just kidding. No, but yeah, it. Wait, is that true? Let me see if that. Sometimes I'm smarter than ChatGPT. I'm just kidding. Chris?
I'd say you have, as the parent, that responsibility based on when you think it matters, you're late.
Yeah.
They're well ahead of you.
Right, and choosing to wait to act in integrity is not integrity, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. All right, let me give you one more, and we'll wrap it up for today. This is back in chapter 28. I should have gone to this one before I had you turn back to 20, but this is in 28, verse 10. Here's what it says. Whoso causeth the righteous to go astray in an evil way, he shall fall himself into his own pit. But the upright shall have good things in possession. That's an interesting statement. Let me read it again. Here's a person who's causing the righteous to go astray. That's a person who causes the righteous to do something wrong, to do something evil. He will fall himself into his own pit, but the upright shall have good things in possession. Notice that there's three different kinds of people here, right? There's people who are righteous, but they apparently aren't walking in integrity because they're able to be led astray. There's people who lead the righteous, meaning outwardly righteous, they're acting right now. And then there's people who lead those people astray. And then there's a third category, and that's the person who is upright. There's that word, integrity. The person who has integrity shall have good things in possession. So you have three categories. You're a person who pretends to be righteous, who has this outward, righteousness. And eventually, you'll be led astray because it's all on the outside. It's not okay for the people, just because you have an outward righteousness, it's not okay for someone to lead you astray. They're also going to be judged, the person who leads you astray and the person who is led astray. But here's the person who's not led astray, the one who's walking in his integrity. He has good things in his possession. In other words, he has God's goodness poured on him because he has a sincere desire in his heart, and he's walking in accordance to a sincere desire to please God. And so there's a very similar verse in Luke that we read not too terribly long ago, which says 17 verse 1, Then said he," that's Jesus, "unto the disciples, It is impossible but that offenses," which is a word that means traps to sin, "but that offenses will come, but woe unto him through whom they come. It were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and he cast into the sea than that he should offend one of these little ones." So Jesus made a very similar statement, Jesus being the only man who's ever lived, more wise than Solomon. And he uses Solomon's wisdom here, saying, here is the fact of the matter. When you are not walking in integrity, there will be traps that are laid for you to sin, and you will fall into those traps. And the person who laid the traps will be judged even more harshly. But that doesn't mean you won't be judged. You had better be ready for the traps. And here's the deal. How are we ready for the traps? Well, by walking in integrity, by sincerely approaching life with a sincere desire to please God, not I'll please God as much as it accomplishes my purposes. What are your final thoughts there on that? Yes?
I like the right thing to do. I didn't have to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. When you have to make a decision that there's no incentive to do right except for God will be pleased with that. Only person you're pleasing is God. That's when you know if you have integrity. If the only thing you'll get out of this is knowing that you please God with your action, and you do it anyway, that's integrity, right? Yeah. Yes?
Purposely doing it, trying to.
Oh, like you mean an evil way, like an evil, like you could lead them astray in a innocent way and lead them astray in an evil way. Yeah, I think no, that might not. Maybe I need to think twice about that. My impression is that it's saying the righteous is walking in a righteous way, and he's going to be led into an evil way instead. But I'd have to think twice. Could it be that it's talking about the manner in which he's led astray is evil?
Whoso causes the righteous to go astray in an evil way.
Right. I'll have to look at the word way there, really, because we use the word way to talk about the way that I did a thing, like the manner I did it, where often, and I'm not saying it couldn't be, but often in Proverbs, way is talking about a path, like a pathway. Yeah. So if this is a word that means pathway, it probably just means taking them out of the right pathway and putting them in the wrong. But it could just mean manner, and then I'd have to retract all of that. So I'm going to retract it ahead of time, just in case I'm wrong. Someone get ChatGPT on the line and tell me if I'm wrong on that. Go ahead. Yeah, and I'm thinking now about the intent behind, because I think that's a good point. The intent of these people behind leading astray, because there can be some accidentally gave you wrong information kind of a thing, and then there can be evil. Like, if you're taking a righteous person out of a righteous path and putting them in an evil path, there's some evil intent there, right? You didn't just accidentally give them wrong information, right? So I think no matter how you look at the verse, you have to have evil intent in the person doing this, where it's like, I want them to fall because I'm not. Well, the because might be different for different people, but a lot of times it's because then I'm going to feel better about what I'm doing, right? I remember this as a teenager working at fast food and everything because, he doesn't, well, not just as a teenager, but as a young adult. He won't drink, he won't cuss, he won't do that. Let's see if we can get Josh to cuss. Let's see if we can get, why? Well, because he's like acting in a righteous way, and it's going to make us feel better about our evil way if we can get him over into it, Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close there and take a few weeks off of Proverbs before we return to it. Our Father, we thank you for your goodness, and we thank you for this wisdom. Lord, but not only have we seen wisdom here this afternoon, but I think we've also seen condemnation on our own hearts. I think that we have been called to repent over lack of integrity that has existed in our hearts from time to time, perhaps even right now. Some of us might be looking at our hearts and saying, man, this needs to be different. It shouldn't just be this outward thing. Lord, I pray that you'd constantly remind us of this important truth every day for the rest of our lives. Help us to keep the genuine, sincere desire to please you at the forefront of our minds, at the front of our questioning whether we've done what was right. May it not be, do people think I did what was right? May it be, does God think I did what was right? Forgive us for the many times we can remember in our lives when we did not act with integrity. And give us determination to follow this wisdom you've given us. We pray all of these things in Jesus' name.